Hello everyone. I'm pretty sure that you all must have started studying because it is almost July and due to this coronavirus we all are stuck in our homes and you all must be studying online. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know when you're watching this video. I am Rushan and today we will be starting social science on this channel. Now social science is one of the most scoring subjects, but unfortunately many of you are scared of this particular subject. So together we will learn in a simple manner and together we will tame this beast. So out of the 4 subjects, first of all we'll be taking the first chapter of civics, which is power sharing. So before I move on to the content of the chapter, there is this simple strategy which I strongly advise to all the people I teach, and it would be really beneficial for you as well, is that before you start a chapter, when you're making the notes and before you start a chapter, list down all the topics that are covered in the chapter. The main advantage of this particular strategy is that it's impossible for you to go through all the 4 books just before your examinations. So when you have them written down on a piece of paper, you can analyze for yourself what are the topics that you need to study more, what are your strong points, what are the weak points, and also it will help you frame answers in your board's examination. Why? Because you would remember the different topics of a particular chapter, so you would be able to answer very well. So let's get started. Let us try to understand what power sharing is actually. See, power sharing is actually the distribution of power. Let us understand this through an example. Now consider a class of 100 students where there is one single teacher who is supposed to manage all 100 students. Now managing 100 students and that too with one single teacher is a very difficult task. Now these students, the 100 students, are divided into 10 rows in which 10 students are sitting in each single row. So the teacher decides to appoint a single monitor in each of these rows. So what is this happening? The central authority, that is the teacher, is now giving or distributing her power to different row monitors. That actually helps in better administration of the class. So when we talk about big countries like India and USA, this power sharing helps to administrate the country very well. So now let's start with the chapter, and first let's have a look at the different topics that we will be studying. First of all, we'll be studying about 2 stories of the countries Belgium and Sri Lanka. Second, we will be studying the effect of majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. Now majoritarianism is a very big term, but we will be explaining this when we come to that topic. Third is accommodation in Belgium. What were the different accommodations that took place in Belgium? We will be studying about that. We have been studying about power sharing and all, but why is it really necessary and why is it desirable? We'll be looking in the 4th topic. And the 5th last topic of the chapter will be about the different form of power sharing that we see in our countries. Now let's start the chapter. The first topic of this particular chapter is the story of Belgium and Sri Lanka. So first we'll have to look at the story of Belgium. Many of you may not have heard about this country, but if you have some interest in football, then you will know that Eden Hazard and Lukaku, 2 of the greatest footballers, are from this particular country. And also you must have heard about Belgium chocolate, which are considered the world's finest chocolate. So Belgium is a small country which is situated in the continent of Europe and whose capital is Brussels. Its size has been compared much smaller than the size of Haryana. So you can very well imagine that this particular country is so small when compared to a state of India. Now I want all of you to focus on the things which I am about to say because it's very important and you need to memorize it as well. This country shares borders with 4 other countries. The 4 other countries which border Belgium are France, Germany, Netherlands and Luxembourg. You all need to remember this because once you remember this, the ethnic composition of this particular country, which is very important, will be easier for you to remember. Now this country is very small, yet the composition, that is the ethnic composition, the type of people and the languages they speak is very complex. So let's have a look at that again. There are mainly three types of language speaking communities that are there in this country. First is the Dutch speaking community, second is the French speaking community, and third is the German speaking community. Now let's look at the percentage as compared to the total population. 59% of the people spoke Dutch who lived in the Flemish region. When we talk about their economic status, they are relatively poorer as compared to the French community. 40% of the people spoke French and they lived in the Wallonian region. Now these people were comparatively richer as compared to other language speaking communities. The remaining 1% of the people that were there in this country spoke German. Now where did they live? This has not been mentioned in your textbook, so there is no need for you to memorize. Now when we look at the economic situation in this particular country, we find that the French speaking community was comparatively richer, as compared to the Dutch speaking community. The Dutch speaking community got the benefits of education and other facilities later on. So there was an economic difference between them. As a result, the economic difference between these two communities gave rise to conflict, which became very acute in the year 1950s and 1960s. It's very important. Many questions are asked on this conflict, and this particular conflict became more acute in the capital city. Now, the capital of Belgium is Brussels. So here the conflict became much more acute. The reason is very simple, because the ethnic composition in this capital city was completely opposite to the ethnic composition of the country. Here 80% of the people spoke French and 20% of the people spoke Dutch. So the conclusion that we can draw from this is that in rest of the country except the capital, the Dutch speaking community was in majority, but when it came to the capital city, the French speaking community was in majority. So that created a lot of problem between the two communities, and therefore there were series of conflicts between them. Now we will look at the similar case of Sri Lanka. Let's have a look at the Sri Lankan story. It is somewhat similar to what we have seen in Belgium. There are different language speaking communities here as well, and which give rise to conflict. So many of you may know the country of Sri Lanka. It is the place where Lord Ram actually killed Ravan. That is the same Lanka. Or if you might have known about the Sri Lankan cricket team, which is quite famous. So that is how you might have known about the country. So it is an island country just a few kilometers away from the coast of Tamil Nadu, and its capital is Colombo. Well, it is not written in your books, but some extra knowledge will not harm you. The population of this country is same as Haryana, which is approximately 2 crore. Now the ethnic composition of this particular country is also very, very diverse. We have mainly 2 language speaking communities here. First is the Sinhala speakers. Second are the Tamil speakers. Now the Sinhala speakers are 74% as compared to the total population, and most of them happen to be Buddhist. That means they practice Buddhism. The Tamil speakers are 18% of the total population, and most of them are Hindu or Muslims. Now in the Tamil speakers, we also have bifurcation here. There are 2 types of Tamil speakers that are present in Sri Lanka. First of them are the Sri Lankan Tamils. The second is the Indian Tamils. Now what is the difference between these two? See, Sri Lankan Tamils are the people who are the natives of this country. They did not come from any other country. The Indian Tamils are the people whose forefathers were Indians and they had come to Sri Lanka as plantation workers. You guys must have studied in your junior classes that the Britishers used to pick people from one country and send them to the other country as plantation workers. So Indian Tamils, who constitute 5% of the total population, had their forefathers who came from India. Now the remaining 7% of the people who stayed in this country were Christians, and these Christians spoke both the languages. They spoke Tamil as well as Sinhala. So they were both language speaking people. Now another important point that I want all of you to remember is that the Sri Lankan Tamils occupied the east and the north part of the country. This can come as a 1-mark question in your board's examination, so it's very important that you memorize about it. Now after studying the stories of both the countries, we come across one conclusion, and that is that in both the countries there was this one language community which was in majority and the rest of them were in minority. And in Belgium we saw that there were conflicts between the Dutch and the French speaking community which started and gave rise to conflict. So now imagine this, that if the majority community started to do things their own way, they started neglecting the minority people and they started making things difficult for them, what would be the outcome of these conflicts? Definitely the outcome of these conflicts will be messy partition and maybe civil war. So the next two topics that we will be studying, that is the majoritarianism in Sri Lanka and accommodation in Belgium, will tell us what actually happened in this country and how did they resolve their conflicts, considering the fact that they had such diverse compositions. So now we'll start with one of the most important topics of this chapter, that is majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. So what does majoritarianism mean? See, it simply is an ideology in which the majority people in the government, in the country, want to work and do things their own way without even caring or without even considering the minority of the country. That is the simple definition of majoritarianism. Now we have studied about the diverse background of Sri Lanka, and now we look what actually happened after Sri Lanka became independent. So Sri Lanka became independent in the year 1948. So how do you remember 1948? See, India became independent in 1947. Add 1 year, so Sri Lanka became independent in 1948. So since we know that the Singla people were in majority in this particular country, the government also had the Singla leaders as in majority. Now these people wanted to establish Singla supremacy. That is, they wanted the Singla people to be treated above all, and they wanted the country to be ruled in whatever manner they wanted. So they adopted a series of majoritarianism measures. So how did they actually do this? See, in 1956 an act was passed which made Singla as the official language of Sri Lanka. On top of that, the government policies favored the Singla people, and the new constitution that was formed after Sri Lanka became independent made it necessary for the Sri Lankan government to protect and foster Buddhism. So you all probably remember that most of the Singla people were Buddhist. They practiced Buddhism. So these were some of the measures that the Singla people had taken. So what was the effect of all this on the Tamil people? See, the Tamil people thought that the country did not belong to them. That is, they had a feeling of alienation. They felt that the Singla government was not sensitive to their culture. Well, it's very simple, right? If nobody's talking about your language, nobody's talking about your culture, they would feel, yeah, this the country that we are living in does not care about our culture. On top of that, the government policies and the constitution actually discriminated the Tamil speakers. Even if they were more qualified, they would not get the government jobs and many benefits. So the effect of all this was there was a trust gap between the Tamil speaking community and the Singla people community. Now let's see what the Tamil speaking community actually did and what were their demands later on. Video to note it down. So when the Tamil people were convinced that the Singla community and the Singla government will do nothing for their benefit and to provide them equal opportunity, the Sri Lankan Tamils launched parties and struggles. Now they launched parties and struggles for three basic reasons. First of all was the recognition of Tamil as the official language. Second was regional autonomy. Third was equality of opportunities in education and job. Now let's elaborate what is the meaning of these points. See, recognition of Tamil as the official language. The Tamil people wanted their own language, that is Tamil, to be recognized as the official language of the state. Regional autonomy. Now regional autonomy simply means that they wanted their own people to rule in certain areas. If you remember, the Sri Lankan Tamils occupied most of the northern and the eastern part of the country. Therefore, they demanded that they want people from the Tamil origin to actually rule on those particular regions. And the third point is equality of opportunities in education and job. Since we have seen that there was discrimination when it came to government policies related to education and jobs, they wanted equal opportunities in both these fronts. But the Singla people were not ready to do that because they wanted their own Singla supremacy and they did not want the minority society to grow. So after all these demands were put forward, the Singla people repeatedly denied these demands. As a result, what happened was in 1980s, these several political parties were formed which now started demanding a separate Tamil Elam. Now what is this Tamil Elam? It is a separate state. Before this 1980s, the people were asking for their own rulers. Now they wanted that a separate Tamil state should be created from the existing Sri Lanka. That is, they wanted partition in the northern and the eastern regions, so that the Tamil people can have their own state and the Singla people can have their own country, so they can do whatever they want. But the Singla people were not ready to divide the country either. So what happened? The distrust among both the communities led to conflict. Now this conflict turned so severe that it turned into a civil war. Now you all must be wondering, what is a civil war? See, basically war is a conflict that is fought between two countries. But when warlike situation arises in a country where the people, that is the civilians, they fight among themselves, such as two different opposing communities, then it turns into a civil war. The effect of this civil war was very severe. Thousands of people from both the communities were killed. Many of the people had to leave their native home and go to different countries as refugees. Otherwise they would have been killed. And this civil war actually was a setback to the social, economic and the cultural life of Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka was advancing at a very good pace, but this civil war put them behind and put them at a starting point where nothing was developed for them, and it was actually a setback for them. Now let's see that did the Belgium government or did the leaders of Belgium adopt a similar strategy, or did they make some better arrangement in order to prevent a civil war? Pause the video and note it down. Now let us have a look at Belgium. How did they tackle the problem of such a diverse composition? We find that between 1917 to 1993, the constitution of Belgium was amended 4 times to make space and specific arrangement to enable all the communities to live together under one country. So this is very important. The constitution was amended 4 times. This question has been asked in the examinations quite often, so it's very important that you memorize this. Now, after this constitution was amended, a model known as the Belgium Model came into existence, which is nothing but an arrangement which made it possible for different communities to live under one country. Okay, so there are 4 main features of this Belgium model, so we'll study them one by one. The first feature is that the constitution prescribes equal number of Dutch and French speaking ministers in the central government. So you would recall that the Dutch community was in majority when it came to the country as a whole, except the capital. Therefore, in the central government, both the communities decided that there will be equal number of ministers in the central government. Now, there are 2 state governments of the Flemish and the Wallonia region. Now, these state governments are not subordinate to the central government. They have their own powers. That means that the central government cannot order the state government to do something. The state government have their own powers and are not subordinate to the central authority. Now Brussels, where the problem was very much acute, has a separate government where there is equal representation. Now here you need to recall that in the capital city, the French speaking community was in majority, while the Dutch speaking community was in minority. But again, both the communities decided that they will have equal representation in this government. This is because of the fact that the Dutch community accepted to give equal representation to the French community in the central government. So the French community in return agreed to give the Dutch community equal representation in the Brussels government. Apart from both these type of governments, we have a third government which is known as the community government. Now the people who are elected to this government are elected by one single language community, and they can make laws and various other administration procedures to manage the working of these different community speaking countries. Now this Belgium model is very much complicated even for the people who are living there, but it has been seen that it has allowed all the communities to live in peace and harmony. Due to all these reasons, when all the European countries decided to come together and form the European Union, Brussels was chosen as the seat, as the place where the headquarters of the European Union would be situated. So it's one very important one-mark question that can be asked to all of you. That is, the headquarters of the European Union is in Brussels. So let us recall what we have studied about the Belgium model. First, between 1970 to 1993, the constitution was amended 4 times to make space for everyone, which gave rise to the Belgium model. There are 4 features of Belgium model. The constitution prescribes equal number of Dutch and French speaking ministers in the central government. The state is not the subordinate to the central government. They have their own powers. Brussels has a separate government where there is equal representation of the French and the Dutch community. A third kind of government exists, which is known as the community government, in which it is elected by the people belonging to one language community. And all this, we come to the conclusion that is the headquarters of the European Union is in Brussels, as the Belgium model turned out to be a very good model for different communities to live together under one country. So we wind up the video here. The next 2 topics, that are the remaining 2 topics of this chapter, why power sharing is desirable and different form of power sharing, we'll be taking them in the next class. So till then, keep studying.